Hello everyone, my name's Daksha Mistry. I'm the Learning and Development Manager for Kingston and Richmond Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Today I've got with me Natalie Walker, who is the Violence Against Women Officer for Kingston Council, and she's going to talk us through the Domestic Abuse Act, which came into force in April 2021. Hi Natalie.
Hi there.
I understand that the Act is in several parts. Will you break it down for us and just run through it part by part?
Yes, so the Act is in 7 parts, so I'll go through all 7 parts now.
That'd be great, thank you.
So part 1 is the statutory definition of domestic abuse. So it's here on the slide for everyone to read, but I'll just point out some key parts. So the violence or abuse can be between those aged 16 or over. Anybody younger than this is considered a child, so it would be child abuse. It's also to point out that it's between intimate partners or family members, and it is regardless of gender or sexuality. There is different types of abuse that you can see there on the slide, but I feel it's important to point out the last one, which is coercive behaviour, as coercive control is now a crime within itself. So it's really important that that one is included in the definition.
Yes, I think it's a really helpful definition, isn't it? It's much broader than before, and it really extends our understanding of what domestic abuse in relationships could look like and who it could affect. I also think that the coercive behaviour definition is really, really helpful and really moves our thinking away from domestic abuse only being about violence.
Yes, no, I definitely agree.
Okay, if we can move on, please.
So the next part is part 2, which is the appointment of a DA commissioner. So the Domestic Abuse Commissioner who's been appointed is Nicole Jacobs, and she's already in office. And so I feel it's really important that we do have a DA commissioner to lead us.
Absolutely, to lead the way and make sure the issue stays high on the agenda. Thanks. Should we move on?
And part 3 is about the new powers for dealing with domestic abuse. So we now have some new civil domestic abuse protection orders and protection notices. So this allows us to provide immediate protection following a domestic abuse incident. And the orders can be accessed through a number of routes. The previous orders could only be accessed through the police, but now other people can also apply for these. A breach of the order is now a criminal offence, which carries a maximum penalty of up to 5 years. And the purpose of these is to require positive requirements on perpetrators. The new orders are being piloted in other parts of the country. They are not yet in London, but we'll see how the pilots work out.
These are really interesting, aren't they? And it will be fascinating to see how the pilots, what they find and how they can be used to support victim survivors and make them feel safer.
Yes. And so if we move to part 4, so this is around the statutory duty on the local authority. So we have a duty to create a domestic abuse local partnership board. We also have to give annual reports to the government regarding how we are complying with the new duty. And so the new duty is for Tier 1 local authorities, Greater London Authority, to fund support for victims and their children within safe accommodation. It also brings a priority need for survivors when they're approaching their local housing provider. So previously, victim survivors of domestic abuse weren't automatically a priority, but they now will be. It also allows any victim survivors who already have secure lifetime tenancies to keep those, even if they are fleeing and have to leave where their tenancy is. Kingston is a Tier 2 district, so it is Kingston's duty to comply with what Tier 1, the Greater London Authority, are doing.
This is also really helpful, and certainly it's been my understanding that it's housing that often keeps victim survivors and children in very dangerous situations. So hopefully this will stop that happening, and again, victim survivors and their children will be able to go to safe places.
Yes, most definitely. Housing is one of the greatest barriers that victim survivors face to accessing support and also living safely. So this is a really good part of the new Act. If I just move to part 5, which is around protection for victims and witnesses in court. So previously in court, a perpetrator would be allowed to cross-examine a victim in family court. This is now no longer allowed. So it allows that level of protection for a victim if they do have to attend court with the perpetrator. There is also special measures which can be put in place in criminal or family court. So this can be things like a separate entrance or exit for the victim, a separate waiting room for the victim survivor from the perpetrator. The victim survivor can give evidence either behind a screen in the court or from another room via video link. So it just prevents the victim survivor having to come face to face with their perpetrator or having to speak to them. And it also stops the perpetrator from further abusing within the court.
This is excellent news, and hopefully will lead to more and more prosecutions of perpetrators.
Yes, I'm really hopeful it will allow victim survivors to have some more confidence to be able to step forward and give the evidence. I'll just move now to part 6. Which is around changes to offences involving violent and abusive behaviour. So, as I mentioned previously, controlling or coercive behaviour is now a crime in itself and is part of the domestic abuse definition. Threats to disclose private sexual images or films is now a crime. I believe it was just previously if the disclosure was made, but now threats to disclose these images or films are now included in the crime. We also have non-fatal strangulation as a crime. They have also removed the consent to the rough sex defence, and also offences committed outside of the UK can now be prosecuted.
So again, some really, really good stuff in terms of supporting victim survivors and catching up with the sorts of things that the internet has been used for in terms of threats to keep people in relationships that they no longer want to be in.
Yes, most definitely. And if I just move to the last part, which is part 7. So this is just a general point, which is around there's going to be a new strategy for prosecution and management of domestic abuse offenders. This can include things like polygraph testing for perpetrators released on licence. It now gives the power to the Secretary of State to issue guidance around domestic abuse, and there will also be guidance on disclosure of information by police forces.
Thank you, Natalie. I think this is really ground-breaking legislation with regards to domestic abuse, and I think will make a huge difference to victim survivors and their families, but also for all practitioners working with domestic abuse. What's your views on it, Natalie?
Yes, I would definitely agree with you. I think it's going to be really beneficial to those frontline staff who are working with and come in contact with victim survivors. I hope it increases their confidence in what they can do for those victim survivors and what support there is out there. I also really hope that it will allow victim survivors to feel that they will be taken seriously, believed and supported, and that many more will come forward and seek that support.
Yes, and if you're interested in finding out more about domestic abuse, this Act, and any other aspect of domestic abuse, we do have training courses on the Kingston Richmond Safeguarding Children Partnership website. So please do keep an eye on there and book on to anything you're interested in.
I would also just like to highlight the services that are available in the local borough of Kingston. So we have the Kingston Domestic Violence Hub, which is run by the organisation Refuge. They also have many domestic violence advocates, and they run a one-stop shop on a Monday. So the advocates would be there. There's other organisations if you'd like to speak to them, such as police, solicitors or housing. They also run a Wings course, which is an 8-week course empowering women and discussing the dynamics of domestic abuse. And lastly, they do run tech abuse training, which is delivered by the IDVAs themselves.
Thank you very much, Natalie.
Thank you.